Greetings, everyone. My name is Dr. Anita Stewart McCafferty. I'm part of the faculty with educational leadership at the University of Southern Maine, and it's my distinct pleasure to welcome you to this course, EDU 605, Testing and Assessment. We're really delighted that you've chosen to learn along with us during the 7-week accelerated asynchronous online course. This is one of my favorite courses because it really focuses on the importance of classroom assessment competencies. And it's really through this lens of thinking about how do we make sure that we as teachers and as educational leaders are as assessment literate as we can be, and also how do we help our students become assessment literate learners. So this concept of assessment literacy has been around for a long time, and we really borrow heavily on the work that Rick Stiggins and Jan Chapuis and our friends at the Assessment Training Institute out in Portland, Oregon, started doing a number of decades ago, really now. And it's really this idea that when we help each other, including our students, really to become literate, assessment literate, then we can really help with taking ownership of our own learning. The idea of self-regulation is very much connected to metacognition and how I reflect on what I'm learning and what my next steps are in the learning process. Of course, none of that happens really well unless the assessment data that we're collecting really helps to inform next steps in instruction and in learning. So it needs to be valid and reliable. It needs to measure what we think it's measuring. It needs to give us solid information, accurate information that we can use to be able to confirm where we are at in our learning journey and what our next steps are going to be. So in this course, there's a healthy blend between looking at assessment for learning, the formative side of assessment, and assessment of learning, the summative side of assessment, and really thinking about not just the tools, but the strategies and the processes and the structures and the underlying principles and keys to quality that help ensure that we're really getting great information, assessment information that helps move learning forward. So this is one of these courses that has many connections to other courses in the teacher leadership program and also in our educational leadership program. And it connects really closely with EDU 603, which is the analysis of teaching and assessment. Some of you may have already taken that course, where we look at the work that John Hattie and his team have done around visible learning, thinking what are those evidence-based strategies that we know that have the greatest impact on student learning. And we also delve into this idea of assessment in that course. So in 605, the course that you're in right now, we go into a much deeper dive into classroom assessment competencies. And really, our goal for you on the other side is that you feel confident, much more confident in your abilities to create accurate, effective, useful assessments for and with your students. Our course outcomes are sixfold, so let me just share those with you. By the end of this course, we're hoping that you'll be able to describe the relationships among student motivation, success at learning, and assessment. The second one is to describe and compare the purposes of assessment into assessment for learning, that formative, and assessment of learning, summative, and how to fit into a balanced assessment system. The third objective is to be able to evaluate different types of assessment using the criteria of standards of quality. So we're going to look at the new and revised standards of quality that Jan Chapuis and Rick Stiggins suggest in the third edition of this Castle book, Classroom Assessment of Student Learning, Doing It Right and Using It Well. So we'll be using this third 2020 edition of Castle, Classroom Assessment for Student Learning. So in that, we'll really think about, they share with us these qualities, these keys to quality assessment. And so we'll make sure that as we're designing assessments and critiquing assessments, that we're looking at it through that lens of quality. The fourth course outcome is to design selected response, extended written response, and performance and product assessments using standards of quality. The fifth outcome is to clarify the purpose for report card grades and how to summarize information accurately. And the sixth outcome is to analyze and interpret school and district data and evidence of learning. Because we're using the PEASL, the standards for professional educational leadership from 2015, our alignment to those really touch on standard 1, which is around mission, vision, and core values. So how you're using relevant data to be able to inform and develop and implement your school vision. The second is around ethics and professional norms. So it's that idea of really thinking about integrity and fairness and transparency and trusting collaboration, continuous improvement, all of those pieces, and thinking about how do we place students at the center of education and accept responsibility for each student's success and well-being. The third PEASL standard that this course closely aligns with is that of standard 4, which is curriculum, instruction, and assessment. So with that in mind as kind of the larger frames, I want you to think about this journey that you're on and that we want our students to be on in taking more responsibility of their own learning. So to do so, they really need to be taught how to learn and how to think about their learning. So you'll see quite a bit of emphasis on the assessment for learning strategies, which include a number of metacognitive strategies, where we're saying that once students get really clear about what they're learning and why they're learning it, then they should have these success criteria that they can say, okay, this is the skill or the concept or the framework that I'm learning. And I know now what it means to be successful. So how am I doing? And that's that self-assessment based on criteria. So we're going to work on accurate appraisal. What does it mean for students and for educators to be able to accurately self-assess based on established criteria? And then what does it mean to be able to set next steps for your learning journey, that goal setting portion of it? So that's part and parcel of this assessment for learning journey. In addition, because we're really looking at this balanced assessment, which often in our classrooms, in our schools, and in our districts, there is an imbalance with more weight being placed on standardized tests, whether those be state standardized tests, other standardized tests that might happen in summative assessments that are happening, as opposed to really putting all of that in balance with what's happening in the classroom on a day-to-day basis, a lesson-to-lesson basis, the formative, which we know really is where the impact happens. So there's so many great high impact assessment for learning strategies that we can incorporate in our classrooms in order to improve student learning and student well-being. So those are some of the major ideas that we want to be able to look at during this class to make sure that we're getting accurate results, that we're effectively communicating those with and to students and other stakeholders like their parents and families and other colleagues who hopefully are collaborating with us to circle around students to really help them in their educational journey. So I invite you as you move through this course to really think about refining your own skills and then thinking about how you can share those skills and competencies and knowledge with other educators. That's part of the leadership, the teacher leadership, the educational leadership component of these courses, and also how you can help to empower your students to be assessment literate so that they understand in the absence of a teacher or a resource online that they understand really what it means to take next steps in their learning journey. This course is divided into 7 modules. Each module is a week long, and we will really be delving in to a number of issues. We start out with thinking about assessment literacy. What does it mean to have a balanced assessment system? We then start to move into ideas around those keys to quality assessment and what does it mean to have clarity and clear learning outcomes. We then move into pretty quickly into sound design elements, and we start with selected response assessments and think about if we are to use those in our classrooms, how would we use those well to get accurate information? From there, we move on to more short answer and extended answer responses and scoring guides and rubrics. We then focus on concept mapping and visual literacy strategies as some of the tools that we can use, as well as we move on to performance assessments where we might be thinking about products that students are creating or performances that they're engaging in or personal communication. So we're thinking about how do we build tasks and rubrics or other scoring criteria around that. Later in the course, in weeks 6 and 7, we start to really look at this idea of summarizing grades for report cards and reporting systems and transcripts, and then thinking about how we help students be able to track and reflect and conference about their learning. I hope that you have a phenomenal time during this class and really feel that you have shored up your classroom assessment competencies. The 2 books that we'll be using as our common reads are, as I mentioned, this Castle book by Stiggins and Chapuis, and then my teaching colleague here at USM, Jeff Beaudry, and I wrote a book in 2018, Teaching Strategies that Create Assessment Literate Learners. So we'll be also using this text, and especially to delve into some of those assessment for learning strategies that have high impact or are likely to lead to success for students. Enjoy the course.